Alright, you remember those mage tests? There's one that's the biggest, the flashiest, it's all explosions, it's hype, moments, and aura, but also sitting in a circle listening to Grandpa remind you how right he was. But this is a deceptively interesting mage test. There's a lot going on under the flash, hype, and aura. Plus, it's the only one I haven't made a video about yet. We can look at these tests from a few different angles, like which mage test had the most smugness, which is the best from an ornithological point of view. But if you want hype, moments, and aura, it's this one. This is the hype, moments, and aura test in what is the first season's hype moments arc. Yeah, that middle mage test. It's a weird one. At the same time, it's kind of the best and worst mage test, depending on how you want to look at it. It breaks down something like this. It's looking for treasure, fighting other mages, fighting duplicates, and then hype moments. These tests are a great reflection of the characters who organize them, and this one absolutely shows this mage's ability to be steamrolled by a cute elf. Because the design for this exam is quite far away from the hype train it ends up being. So, of the two tests that go as planned, they each have a set goal for participants. And then there's a secondary meta that emerges once they figure it out. It's never just reach the original goal, you have to reach a little deeper. Sense claims it's an easy test. You raid a dungeon, you get to the bottom floor, then you win. Doesn't sound like the best mage test, but one of the bigger purposes of this arc is to explore magic and the philosophies behind it. Those from these guys, but also of the Continental Magic Association and its staff. The tests are a reflection of the person designing them. Sense is pretty outward about how her philosophy on magic has influenced the test. She dislikes fighting, wants a test where everyone can just pass together, or, get bodied and fail together. Not only that, but there's a get out of jail free card in the golems, which are these cool things. In theory, these should put the onus on the test taker's guile. No one has to die here, but you can't be too stubborn. On the surface, it's maybe the best one for Frieren. It's charging them all to do adventuring stuff. Go explore, find some junk, have fun. Of course, the dungeon takes a turn when we find out why no one has cleared it. But it doesn't really take away from the fact that Sense is right. There is an easy enough method for passing this test. Listen to Denken. It's not that complicated, but it's still the better designed mage test out of the three. Denken explains pretty simply what they should be doing. When people are just jerks, they get given a group task, and rather than pull their weight and work together, they'd rather turn it into a death game. Okay, but in reality, this is the second test, so it's after everyone has gotten annoyed with each other in the first one. You tried to kill me, you splashed me, you probably used a spell to see me without clothes on. Everyone hates each other, it's not going to fly. On the other hand, if they hypothetically say, put that aside and listen to Denken, they go in, methodically figure it out, decide what to do. Well, they can win, since there's a big enough pool of mages that they have a counter to any one mage's speciality. Everyone passes, other than the real jerks who just refuse to talk it out. And that's why I think this test is really interesting, is that it feels like Sense is just thinking ahead. She doesn't want to work with people who are at each other's throats. So here, go learn to get along. This test just filters out all the jerks. She's sick of having to deal with the idiots who pass exclusively violence-based exams. So this exam is, can you communicate effectively with your peers? I know there's a lot more there, literally, but let me focus on the broad idea for a moment, because I'm going to talk about themes. Frieren is out discovering humanity and people, and the answer to why the Continental Magic Association spends 75% of its yearly budget on shampoo. But her main goal isn't to get stronger, it's to get to know the world. This test is perfect for that. So while the climax might be all hype, there's a bit more going on underneath this test, beginning with the most fun part of it, that bit before it all goes horribly wrong. The dungeon itself in this test is a little plain. In the hype moments and aura, it's a dull enough design that it doesn't distract from all this battle nonsense. But the dungeon is maybe the most compelling, while Frieren is exploring it. So the first section, she's trying to get the dungeon map, and probably the compass too. Finding secret rooms, treasure chests. She's an old pro at this. Look, it's like when you play your 14th Zelda and the game is pointing you towards unlit torches. She knows what she's doing. You don't need to keep telling her. Him wanted to take the longer, more fun route, which is kind of what Frieren is doing in even taking these tests just to save a bit of money. The rooms in the dungeon look really quite plain when it's everyone other than Frieren. As soon as it's this party though, suddenly it's all kinds of dynamic. The walls can move, there's secrets. You even need the kind of mini-map you normally only see at malls to find anything interesting. It's an interesting dungeon. To everyone else, it's just a maze standing in their way. I think it's presented this way because the only people who are seeing any joy in the dungeon is this party. It seems whenever we see the other parties, the tomb isn't all that. It's only through Frieren's exploring that this is all entertaining. It's visually that interesting, because to Frieren and Fern, it is. The exploring is entertaining in itself. We get a hint at this with Fern's little chat that she finds enjoyment through the enjoyment of others, and the way that the dungeon has been framed the whole time was already doing this to the viewer, to you. I think it's something universal. Somewhere can be dull, but if you're taking an interest and trying to find something more there, that same place isn't so dull. But the exploring is just the start. In the second half, it becomes just a backdrop, even for this group as well. The maze-like atmosphere has its own benefits though. It's all setting the stage for the actual test. Exploring a dungeon. If you were to sit and list all the bad things that could possibly happen, I think this might be pretty high up there. The focal point of this dungeon is the Water Mirror Fiend, which doesn't get a new hairstyle every week, sadly. That's the difference there. It's a mythical era monster that can create these perfect replicas. So I guess these lads are the bigger test. The monster is just a tool for creating them. It's weak and not much of a character by itself. It gets dispatched real quickly in the end. So dramatically, it doesn't matter. The test changes, though, at this point. Now all they need to do is break down the door, smash that thing's face in, have a nice quiet pint, and wait for all these duplicates to blow over. A big thing with this test is, did Frieren's presence ruin it? By making this OP duplicate there in the first place. So let's just chuck her in the trash for a minute. She's gone. But it's still a rough test without her and her duplicate. The instructor is still asking everyone to defeat a version of herself. There's still this guy out there, and without a much stronger duplicate to force everyone together into one group, it might not have been so easy to pass this test. That's another bad thing that could happen. No OP duplicate, no motivator for everyone to get along. Yeah, the clones are raw hype, but put two of her in an arc and you'll probably get a lot of that. So the rallying effect of a raid boss is just as disruptive to the test as having Frieren there in the first place. I think it's an underrated factor of this test. It's kind of self-balancing. But no matter the difficulty in passing the test, there seems to be a simple solution to this one. But one that shows off how fantastic a design this was. It's the best Mage test. This is a trickier test than the first one in some ways, but it's also kind of solvable in a really simple way, but it's a way that ties into the most important themes. This test is designed to be non-violent in a mage-on-mage sense, but it also wants to judge the participants as a group, not individually. As Denkin repeatedly points out, the solution isn't complicated. This group even manages it between just the three of them, but Sense doesn't expect everyone to pass the test. The tests are a reflection of those planning them, and hers is very pessimistic. Hiding under her being nice and going in with them and all that hype is really quite a depressing idea about people, that she assumed simply speaking to each other will be out of their reach unless it's an exceptional crop this year. She assumes they won't be able to rely on anyone to survive but themselves. It's not a bright thought. She probably won't pass all of them. The dungeon is surmountable with some teamwork, but she's assuming that they're all too obnoxious to do so, which means, yeah, it's a fantastic test for lining up with this patronizing elf's view of things. Most entrants will be lacking in common sense, so maybe it's the best first-class mage test. Not only does it fit fantastically, having these hidden depths beyond being an easy test, but it's self-balancing. It has to take these batches of mages that were just at each other's throats, and they need to be willing to tell their former enemies exactly how to put them down. It's a trust exercise, being set by someone who thinks most of them are going to fall flat on their faces. And while it isn't the most challenging of the tests, in some ways it might be the best for finding mages to work with in the future. The other tests are a bit showier. They want to prove raw skill, but Sense's approach is to find which mages can tackle a genuinely difficult task together, to not get distracted by ego, to actually work together. To listen to Denkin, man. And when a guy is bleeding out on the floor, Denkin takes the time to point out he was right, and everyone else was wrong before he helps. And yeah, he was right, but maybe the most important aspect of this test is what all that aura farming is hiding, that the fight is based an important skill to develop. So, those epic duplicate fights aren't just hype moments in Aura, it goes a bit deeper. Case in point, the Ubel fight, where she unveils her death wish for all to see. That's self-analysis. Whereas before, the fights involved characters just kind of monologuing about how they view magic. Here, the duplicates are a fantastic tool for self-reflection. Literally, but not literally. I mean, it's right there in what it's testing for, but it's not just as a fighting thing or reflecting on being a mage. It's a reflection of yourself as a whole. I suppose it makes sense what Frieren's clone is then, a raid boss that is a major obstacle. It's overcome by working with the other mages, the warm power of friendship and all of that. Once we learn about the duplicates, it's clearly a fight you can't do alone. You need teamwork, you need others, you need the capacity to reflect on yourself and be critical. Ultimately, the group that gathers together does use these skills to take out the other duplicates. And while they're not in the room, the planning for the big Frieren fight requires everyone. Although not everyone who passes really contributes, which is one of the biggest problems with this test. If you were to work with the others and not really contribute, not really do anything, you'd still get through. You'd coast by. And you know what the biggest offender of this is? It's Glasses. It's him. He barely does anything in this whole test. To keep his clone secret, he selfishly avoids being helpful like it's the plague. Helps Ubel once, but that's it. His own secrets are more important to him. If everyone had acted like Glasses, it would have been a wipeout. But it means that even in the smallest ways, we get a decent look into mages who have been quieter so far. Most interesting in this planning section. Her ideas and skills that get teased, her scans, her radar, her healing, plans of grand hypnotism, all in some fairly chill sections. So it's not just all hype moments and aura, there's a lot of that, but there's more. And wormed in is a decent exploration. You gotta dig deeper first. You enter the dungeon and there's the surface level qualities, but the deeper you go into the dungeon literally, the deeper we get into the characters symbolically, and the more open they have to be with each other about themselves. There's a fantastic symbolism to this test on quite a grand scale. It's just that a lot of it gets a bit buried by how hype it is. The next test being a vibe check definitely evens it out, but there isn't much getting away from it. This ending is flashy. Everybody gets a hype moment. Even Weirbill rips a roof down onto someone. Crazy cool moment that. Obviously the big one is for Frieren and Fern in this amazing fight. It's very well animated. The way it cuts back and forth is economical. Sure, it's better for pacing what is a shorter flurry of action, but it means the music can take some downtime too before ramping back up as the fight comes back. It's a strange trick with this fight, and it can feel like the events are being scripted to the music rather than the other way around. It's not that this fight has nothing going on though, there's a lot of planning going into it. Frieren is analysing herself as it goes. We have payoff for Fern across most of her life doing magic here too. It's a fight against an emotionless, made of stone Frieren. Thematically, it's a nice rounder to the journey she's been on personally since meeting Himmel. She's fighting a vision of herself before, and the strategy behind this was hashed out like this. It's collaboration. It's the kind of thing the old Frieren sulking in the woods she wasn't huge on. But post-Himmel, it's different. She's winning here through that growth specifically. We descend into the characters and get to look directly at the conflict between the old and the new, a visual metaphor for growth. But it isn't just one duplicate really. Sense, Fern, Denkin, all their replicas should be problems. I mean, Denkin's doesn't really come up much, but it should be a bigger problem. First-class mages should be able to overcome adversity, but in some ways this test is perfect for what the association is looking for. There is more here than just hype moments and aura. So, is it a good test? By what metric? I mean, I think the whole pass as a group thing makes it unique, and given that some people think she never intended anyone to pass, it's clearly got a kick to it. But there was a clear victory condition. Her clone would be the biggest problem, but she uses such a specific type of magic that the chances someone could counter it are pretty high with a wide enough group. Plus, they're not taking the test to learn under first-class mages. They're becoming them. They need to prove they can become her peers eventually. So yeah, they've got to be good enough to take her down too. Plus, it does filter out the unworkable candidates, not just the weaker ones, but the ones that can't follow basic instruction, the ones that will be no use as a tool. I absolutely love this test. Symbolically, there's so much going on. These tests are a reflection of the tester, and it's made me wonder what kind of test Frieren would host. Probably a dumb one. or any of the other successful candidates. Frieren making people do chores. Ubel's could be rough. In some ways, this test reflects a pretty dismissive view of the average mage's ability to talk to each other, to form a connection, but it's also hopefully optimistic about the qualities a mage needs to be truly first class. And the metric I haven't mentioned yet for assessing it is screen time for decent characters. Himmel only appears twice, so it's rubbish, worst damn test of all three. It sucks, it's trash, absolute shit. Hey, thanks for watching. I've been Company Little. There's more videos, and you can sub if you like hitting buttons. Alright, cheers.